AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Senator Rubio, Marco Rubio from Florida, he fired off a letter to J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, getting after him about J.P. Morgan's reported partnership with ByteDance, the parent company of TikTok, which is, of course, essentially a Chinese communist company, because there are no companies that exist, particularly at that scale, that do not fall under the purview of the Chinese Communist ruling party. He criticized their partnership with ByteDance to develop a payment infrastructure, application payment infrastructure. He wrote, assisting online companies to build out real-time payment systems, centralize banking structures, and streamline access to millions of users' financial information is no doubt lucrative. However, by partnering with ByteDance to develop a treasure trove of private data, including that of millions of Americans, J.P. Morgan Chase has effectively handed the combination to the vault to the CCP as well. Yikes. Strong words. And he continued, it's concerning enough for J.P. Morgan Chase to carry water for Beijing and falsely characterize ByteDance's mission as to inspire creativity and enrich life, quote unquote, rather than disseminate CCP propaganda and censor references to the Uyghur genocide. Even more alarming, however, is that J.P. Morgan Chase is now actively working with ByteDance to enlarge its capacity for real-time data exchange, track and trace, and to see and monitor payments in light of its gross abuses of user information. We talk a lot about what the government, what our government should or shouldn't do with respect to Chinese communist forays in every sector, including business sector. But what about what American companies are willing to do or not do when it comes to the Chinese communists? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by Thomas Duesterberg, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute and author of Economic Cracks in the Great Wall of China. Thomas Duesterberg, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
And it's a pleasure to be with you.
So what about Marco Rubio's pointed criticism at Jamie Dimon and effectively Wall Street?
Well, he's exactly right. Any partnership that would allow access to financial information of Americans, like this one apparently does, is a looming disaster, I think, for us, because the Chinese, as Senator Rubio pointed out, Chinese companies are always under the thumb of the Chinese Communist Party. If they want to extract data on those who are using the system, they can do that, and they've already done that. We've seen with TikTok, personal information on Americans who are using TikTok. So this is not a good move on the part of J.P. Morgan Chase.
Well, I mean, it isn't why. I mean, it is potentially quite lucrative, I'm sure, and so for their perspective of, specifically profit maximization, why not do it?
Well, J.P. Morgan Chase is an American company. They fall under U.S. laws. U.S. laws protect private information much more expansively than the Chinese do. So they run the risk of violating U.S. privacy laws. Furthermore, it's helping our major competitor, China, to amass data that can be used in any variety of ways, not only to learn about the spending habits and all other habits of Americans, but feed into their machines of big data, which help them develop their artificial intelligence algorithms.
Well, here's another riff from another op-ed, and I'll tell you the author in a second. You probably know, many of our listeners won't. This commentator writes, "We need serious federal protections for Americans' privacy. That means clear limits on how companies can collect, use, and share highly personal data, your internet history, your personal communications, your location, your health, genetic and biometric data. It's not enough for companies to disclose what data they're collecting. Much of that data shouldn't be collected in the first place, and the protection should be even stronger for young people." This commentator is talking about American big tech companies, and he happens to be the President of the United States, Joe Biden. That's an op-ed that he wrote for the Wall Street Journal. So, I mean, I'm not comparing the perniciousness of the Chinese Communist Party to and their wholly owned subsidiaries like ByteDance to American big tech companies or the federal government here, but it seems like we have our own problem figuring out what the paradigm should be on these issues like privacy.
Yeah, we need to get on that. We certainly ought to do a better job. It's true that American digital companies are amassing this sort of data, using it for their own purposes. If you'll allow me, I want to go back to this question of artificial intelligence, because a lot of these companies, especially Google and Microsoft, have huge research operations in China on things like artificial intelligence, and a lot of the breakthroughs that these companies are achieving in these areas are done in China, and so they're shared with the Chinese. And I don't think that's a very good idea either. So it's broader than just collecting personal information. It's developing the technological tools of the future that could be used against us.
That's a good point. And so the conversation now, part of the conversation now about banning ByteDance, about banning TikTok, I should say, ByteDance being its parent company. You've seen some state governments do it on state employees' phones and so on and so forth. Federal government, but is that the wrong conversation then? Whether or not to ban TikTok misses the larger point.
Well, it's part of the larger point, there are multiple reasons to ban TikTok. It's not just they're collecting personal information. There's a much simpler way to go about this, which is the rules that govern world trade, and we can argue about that, but they require a certain form of reciprocity. If our companies can't operate in China, then their companies ought not to be able to operate in the United States. So you've got that point as well, which is our companies can't operate their digital social media platforms in China. Why should TikTok be able to operate in the United States? I'm
sorry, go ahead.
I just wonder if Jamie Dimon has thought about that as well.
Yeah, it's sort of a strange thing, and I think people, myself included, sometimes have problems wrapping our minds around it, because you wrote this piece about the weakness of President Xi and his regime. It's not nearly as strong as it appears from the outside. They want to project strength, but they're captive to all these internal contradictions of central planning, just like Soviets were. However, different than back in the day when it was the Cold War, does it seem to you, it sort of seems to me, that we have American companies propping up this regime and actually allowing it to be stronger than it otherwise would be, were all those internal contradictions left to play themselves out the way they did for the Soviets.
Well, it's absolutely true. A couple examples in the financial sector, the Chinese real estate sector, which is a very, very large part of their economy, up to 30%, now depends a lot on selling bonds outside of China because they're so indebted. So companies like J.P. Morgan Chase are also helping to prop up the economy of China. there are many examples of this. There was some reporting in the paper today about Tesla. Tesla has a huge plant in Shanghai, but the Chinese are apparently thinking about restricting their sales because Elon Musk also runs TikTok, and Elon Musk also
Twitter
operates SpaceX, and the Chinese are claiming that Tesla cars can be used as spy mechanisms within China. So the point here is that American companies are allowed to operate in China on Chinese terms, but when it becomes useful for the Chinese to start squeezing them, they happily do that. And
oh, sure. Right. I mean, that's... Yeah, that's how it works, right? And we don't like Elon Musk's rules with Twitter, so we're going to punish him over here with Tesla. Sure.
Well, and it's not just limited to Tesla. I mean, the financial sector, the J.P. Morgan Chases and the Goldmans and the Blackstones were supposed to be allowed to operate more or less freely in China 25 years ago. And the Chinese have opened just enough to say that, yeah, you can do certain things. But by the time those companies were allowed to operate, the Chinese had already developed pretty good, for instance, electronic payment systems. So our companies can't operate effectively there. And it's unclear to me why American companies keep thinking that there's some golden pot at the end of the rainbow in China.
I guess they they just see 1.5 billion people and they say that's a market we can't ignore. Is it as simple as that? Because people like Jamie Dimon, even though some of these other people are despicable, like Fink at BlackRock, they're not naive. They're not babes in the woods here.
They're not. No, I agree with you wholly on that one.
So what is their thinking? I mean, if they're not naive, they know they've got eyes wide open here. Then is it just we can't ignore a market of 1.5 billion people?
I think it's pretty much as simple as that. Their boards tell them that they need to be in the China game. There is probably the thought that, for instance, in the area of financial services, the Chinese have developed some good payment systems. And maybe they want to get access to those technologies, but it's in the long run, it's something of a fool's errand because the Chinese will protect their own market, and they will not allow foreign firms to prosper in the long run in their market.
And the free trader may say, and I'm inclined to be one, but there are limits. The free trader would say, "Well, wait a second. You want to start banning Chinese, Chinese communist affiliated companies from buying real estate in America or doing business in China. If you start to apply some sort of American standard to who American companies can do business with, then you're going to close off commerce to a lot of the world, not just China." My response to that would be, well, yeah, I understand the slippery slope argument, but China is unique because of its size and because of its inclinations for world domination. And so I think you can make an exception to the general, more pro-free trade rule when it comes to a expansionist power the size of China.
Well, I think we've got to do that, and we've got to be more aggressive in pushing back on China. China is dependent in a lot of ways on outside companies, and especially in the financial sector. There are things we can do to send them a stronger message than we've sent in the past, that we're not going to do business with them if they're going to be in it solely for their own benefit, and there's got to be some sort of mutual gain from this. They've got to give up this game of this dream. She calls it the China dream of world domination. So we've just got to be more aggressive in the messages we're sending to them.
He is Thomas Duesterberg, Senior Fellow at the Hudson Institute, author of Economic Cracks in the Great Wall of China. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Okay, my pleasure.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560.